2.4 million square kilometres. The largest country in Africa. Once the breadbasket of Rome, a crossroads where Phoenician, Roman, Ottoman and French empires collided and left their marks across 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. And strangely, almost no one tells its story. This is Algeria. The world calls it the North Korea of the Sahara, a country that controls entry with an iron grip, virtually closed to independent travellers. But behind those barriers lies a land where Roman amphitheatres still stand under African skies, where cedar forests climb mountains no guidebook has mapped, and where the Mediterranean washes against 1,600 kilometres of coast that almost no one outside this country has ever seen. Perhaps it was too layered, too ancient, too alive for a world that prefers simple headlines. This is not the Algeria of closed borders and silence. This is the Algeria the world forgot. The first thing you notice about Algiers is the light. It bounces off white facades and terracotta rooftops, cascading down hillsides toward a Mediterranean so blue it feels painted. 5 million people live here, stacked along ridges and ravines, every balcony draped with laundry, every rooftop crowned with satellite dishes pointed toward the sky. This is not a city hiding from the world. This is a city the world has simply not been looking at. Palm-lined boulevards run parallel to the coast, where buses and taxis weave through traffic that never quite stops. French colonial arcades alternate with concrete apartment blocks, and every few hundred metres a mosque's loudspeaker marks the hour. The city hums with the energy of a capital that has absorbed every century thrown at it and converted each one into another layer of noise, ala, and concrete. Below, trains glide past French colonial facades that could belong to Marseille or Nice, their arched windows framing streets where Ottoman-era fountains still trickle water. In the fishing port, wooden boats knock gently against the quay, and the smell of salt and diesel mixes with the sound of gulls circling overhead. Algiers is a city of layers. Each empire left its signature, and each generation built on top of the last. At night, the city transforms. The Martyrs' Memorial glows in the red, white and green of the national flag, its silhouette visible from every hillside. Highways become rivers of light, and the harbour dissolves into a field of reflections stretching toward the open sea. In the harbour, a lone rower pulls through still water, his oars cutting lines between painted hulls. Beyond the breakwater, the Mediterranean stretches north toward Europe, toward a continent that once colonised this coast and now barely remembers its name. Step inside the Casbah of Algiers and the modern city vanishes. Narrow alleys climb steeply between walls that have not moved in 4 centuries. Tunnel-like archways frame shafts of light, and the air cools as the passages tighten. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a citadel the Ottomans built in the 16th century on the bones of something even older. Paint peels in layers, blue over green over white, and graffiti blooms alongside hanging plants. That spill from windows no wider than an arm's reach. Every surface tells a story of repair and neglect, of generations who stayed when the empires left. Deeper inside, Dar Aziza Palace opens into a courtyard of spiralled columns and zellage tilework so precise it appears machine-cut. A marble fountain catches sunlight through arches that have framed this same view since the 16th century. Ottoman governors once walked these corridors, their footsteps absorbed by floors laid in geometric patterns that repeat without ever quite matching. In the palace of the day, staircases rise beneath painted ceilings, and hallways narrow into passages lined with intricate wood carvings. A moon-shaped basin sits near the entrance, a detail so small most visitors walk past it. Yet one that speaks to an entire philosophy of light and water woven into stone. Above the Casbah, the Ketchawa Mosque stands where Moorish and Byzantine architecture merged centuries ago. Twin minarets rise in tilework and carved stone, and massive wooden doors, each panel hand-carved, have opened and closed through Ottoman rule, French occupation and independence. Further uphill, the Grande Poste d'Alger gleams in neo-Moorish white against the Mediterranean sky. Bougainvillea frames its facade, and in the garden below, a sculpture of fists breaking chains marks the cost of the revolution that gave Algeria its name back. In the plaza, the bronze equestrian statue of Emir Abdelkader, Algeria's founding resistance hero, stands in perpetual motion. Horse and rider, sword rays frozen against the sky. Every morning, the city wakes around him, and the story he started writes another page. On the northern edge of the city, where highway meets coastline, the Jama El Jazair commands the skyline. The Great Mosque of Algiers, third largest on Earth. Its minaret rises 265 metres, the tallest in Africa, and its golden dome catches the Mediterranean light like a second sun. Completed in 2019, it is modern Algeria's declaration to the world: we are still here, and we are still building. Seen overhead, the complex sprawls across manicured gardens and geometric plazas, a bridge arching over the highway to connect mosque and sea. At night, the minaret glows against the dark water, a vertical line of light visible from ships 30 kilometres offshore. On the hill above the city stands a different kind of monument. Maqam-e-Shahid, the Martyrs' Memorial, 3 concrete fins reaching skyward, like the fronds of a palm turned to stone. It commemorates those who died in the War of Independence against France. From 1954 to 1962, over 1 million Algerians perished. The monument dominates every sightline, a reminder that this nation's modern history was written in sacrifice. Below the memorial, the Jardin d'Essai du Hamma, one of the oldest botanical gardens in Africa, spreads its canopy toward the sea. Families walk beneath palm rows that were planted when Algeria was still a colony, breathing air that smells of jasmine and eucalyptus. And on the opposite hill, facing the memorial across the bay, Notre Dame d'Afrique, a Catholic basilica built by the French in 1872. It still stands. Inside, an inscription reads, "Our Lady of Africa, pray for us and for the Muslims. 3 faiths, 3 centuries, 1 coastline." In the harbour below, a tanker emerges from morning fog, and Algiers wakes, as it always has, layered, contradictory. However, 2,000 years ago, Rome stretched its empire south across the Mediterranean and into the mountains of North Africa. In eastern Algeria, it built Jamila Kouikoul, in Latin, a complete Roman city perched on a ridge between 2 ravines. Amphitheatre, forum, temples, baptistery, all still standing, recognised by the world as irreplaceable. At its peak, 10 to 20,000 people lived here. Merchants, soldiers, priests running a city with baths, markets, and a sewage system that most medieval European towns would not match for another millennium. Wildflowers now grow between the stones where senators once walked. The columns of the Severan Temple frame the mountains beyond, their surfaces weathered to the colour of honey. Stone paths lead through archways that have not shifted in 2 millennia. And marble catches the afternoon light against slopes of green grass and scattered poppies. Every carved lintel, every worn step, speaks of trade and worship and governance on the southern edge of an empire most people associate only with Italy. Further east, on the arid plain below the Oasis mountains, Timgad. Founded by Emperor Trajan in 100 AD as a retirement colony for Roman legionnaires. The grid is still visible, streets crossing at perfect right angles, as precise as the day they were surveyed. The triumphal arch of Trajan rises from the ruins, and an amphitheatre carved into the hillside still holds its shape after 19 centuries. They built it to last. It did. West of Algiers, the ruins change character. At Tapaza, Roman columns rise not from arid plains, but from coastal pine forests, the turquoise Mediterranean shimmering behind every archway. Seen at a distance, the ancient city stretches along a rocky shoreline. A road once lined with columns still traces its path toward the sea. A lone figure walks through a stone archway into sunlight filtered by cypress and wild olive. The ruins here are not fenced, not staged. They simply exist, crumbling walls, threaded with roots, a weathered tree bending over a fallen capital. Albert Camus wrote about this place, about the tension between ancient stone and untamed nature. That tension has not eased. But Algeria's story predates Rome by centuries. Nearby, on a green hillside overlooking the plain, stands the royal mausoleum of Mauritania. A circular stone tomb built by Berber kings long before Caesar's legions crossed the sea. Its tiered blocks rise in concentric rings like a pyramid compressed into a drum. Plants push through the ancient masonry, softening edges that were carved before Rome was an empire. In Numidia Park, a bronze statue of King Jugurtha, the Berber warrior who defied Rome and nearly won, stands among the trees. The empires came and left their columns. The Berbers stayed and left their name on the land. Constantine, city of bridges. Built on a limestone plateau split in half by the Rummel Gorge. A chasm that drops hundreds of metres through the heart of the city like a wound that never closed. Buildings cling to the cliff edges on both sides, their foundations disappearing into vertical rock. Roads end at the abyss. The only way across bridges. Seven of them, spanning the void at different heights, each one an act of defiance against geography. The most dramatic is Sidi Emesid, a suspension bridge hanging 175 metres above the gorge floor, where the Rummel River has been carving through limestone for millions of years. Lush vegetation clings to the rock faces below. and the sound of water rises faintly from a depth the eye can barely reach. People walk across it daily, their footsteps absorbed by the wind. Some do not look down. Nearby, an ancient stone bridge faces a modern one, engineering from different centuries solving the same impossible problem. The old arch, built when Constantine was still called Cirta, holds its curve against the sky as cars cross the newer span beside it. Apartment blocks perch on the cliff edge as if daring gravity. An abandoned factory leans over the gorge, its chimney silhouetted against the sky. The Mela Slimane Bridge connects to a domed structure embedded in the rock face itself. Constantine did not adapt to its geography. It fought it and built over the wounds. This is still Algeria. 60 kilometres south of Algiers, in the Blida Atlas. Krea National Park disappears into fog so thick it erases the tree line. Cedar forest, ancient, dense, wrapped in moss, rise from slopes that most visitors to this country never reach. Paths dissolve into mist. The air smells of wet bark and earth. The Atlas cedar, Cedrus atlantica, is endemic to these mountains. Some specimens have stood here for over 800 years, their trunks wider than a car, their canopies filtering light into green gold columns. Above the cloud line, Krea Mountain rises into clear sky, the forest floor invisible beneath the inversion layer. An abandoned cable car cabin dangles among the branches, rusting quietly, nature reclaiming what humans left behind. In the Atlas valleys, waterfalls cascade over moss-covered rock into dark pools where the water turns black with tannin. At dawn, sunbeams pierce the canopy and illuminate dirt roads winding toward peaks that glow gold in the first light. The Tell Atlas stretches green and layered toward the coast, ridge after ridge fading into haze. Hikers navigate rocky trails through forests where fir trees catch the sun in bursts of lens flare. This is not the Sahara's Algeria. This is the other one, the green one, the hidden one, the one that contradicts every assumption. In the mountain grasslands, cattle graze behind crumbling stone walls while mist clings to peaks above. On a nearby hillside, the ruins of an abandoned village slowly return to earth, stone walls softened by ivy, doorways open to the sky. These mountains are not empty. They are lived in, quietly, by people who never needed the world to notice. Below, in the city of Blida, the Al-Kawthar Mosque rises with gold-trimmed arches against a dramatic sky. that civilization in Algeria does not end where the desert begins, it begins where the mountains do. In the far northeast, El Kala National Park stretches across a chain of wetlands, lakes and coastal forests designated as a Ramsar site. One of the most important migratory bird corridors in the Western Mediterranean. Below the drone, the marshes shimmer in patchwork green and brown, and the flocks of birds lift from the reeds in waves that ripple outward like wind across water. Horses and cattle graze in pastures that border the wetland, undisturbed by the thousands of wings passing overhead. The landscape here feels closer to Ireland than to North Africa rolling, damp, impossibly green. Higher in the Atlas, Lake Tamasgeta sits at the summit like a mirror left on a mountaintop. Green slopes roll down to its edges, and a solitary tent marks the only human presence for kilometres. This is Algeria, at its quietest, a country that holds its breath between the mountains and the sky. Tizi Ouzou, the heart of Kabylie. Berber villages cling to every ridgeline like barnacles on a hull, their red-tiled roofs cascading down green slopes toward valleys where olive groves catch the light. So these mountains have been home to the Amazigh people for thousands of years. A culture whose language and identity predate Arabic, predate Islam, predate every empire that ever claimed this land. The Kabylie landscape is dramatic, jagged rock formations rise above terraced hillsides, and the Tel Atlas unfolds in layers of green that seem to have no end. This is Algeria's most densely populated mountain region. Yet from above, it feels untouched, as if the villages grew from the soil rather than being built upon it. In spring, the hills turn emerald, and terracotta rooftops glow against the turquoise sea beyond. Goats roam freely across mountain roads, indifferent to passing cars. Algeria's coastline stretches over 1,600 kilometres along the Mediterranean, longer than Spain's, longer than Italy's. At Ain Temouchen, golden cliffs plunge into water so clear it shifts between turquoise and sapphire depending on the hour. Rocky islands break the surface offshore, their edges white with sea spray and circling gulls. East along the coast, the city of Bajaya sits where the mountains meet the sea under veils of morning fog. The landscape is vertical peaks dissolving into cloud, forests tumbling toward beaches, and a coastline so rugged it bends and folds like crumpled paper. At Jejel, sandy coves hide between cliffs, and the beaches of Skikda catch the sunset in gold. People gather at the water's edge as the light fades families, fishermen, couples walking barefoot where the Mediterranean laps against North Africa. On the cliffs near Bajaya, Barbary macaques. Algeria's only primates sit on ledges above the sea, watching the waves with an indifference earned over millennia. They take food from human hands without flinching, their ancient eyes unchanged since before the first ships crossed this water. And at Oran, Algeria's second city, Fort Santa Cruz crowns the hill, its statue gazing over the urban sprawl and the harbour below. The Mediterranean stretches north toward Europe, a body of water that has connected and divided these two continents for as long as anyone can remember. South of the Atlas, the landscape tilts toward the Sahara and a different Algeria appears. Gardia, the Mazab Valley, 5 fortified cities built by the Mozabite Berbers over 1,000 years ago. Protected by international decree, unchanged by choice. Tan and white buildings cluster around minarets in concentric rings, as if each city grew outward from its mosque like ripples in sand. Palm trees thread between the walls, and covered markets channel shade through streets designed to deflect the sun. The Mozabites developed a system of water distribution so precise it still functions today. Channels carved into rock, cisterns hidden beneath courtyards, every drop accounted for in a valley where rain falls perhaps 3 times a year. Architecture here is not decoration. It is survival rendered in plaster and stone. Further south, Taggart, where the Sahara swallows a town. At golden hour, clay buildings glow orange against dunes that rise like frozen waves behind the settlement. The sand reaches the edge of the last house and stops. Or perhaps the town reached the edge of the sand and decided this was far enough. Date palms fill the valley floor between the dunes and the old Casbah. And the Oud, the seasonal river, traces a green line through the otherwise amber landscape. At sunset, the shadows of the dunes stretch across the town like the fingers of a closing hand. Timmerman, a red earth Casbah rising from the desert floor. Its ancient towers silhouetted against a sky so blue it feels artificial. Ruins and palms share the same ground, and the boundary between what is lived in and what has been abandoned blurs with every passing decade. Nearby, the Goofy Canyon cuts through layered stone like pages of an open book. The Abiod River carved this gorge over millennia, leaving cliff dwellings that cling to the rock face like swallows' nests. People lived here until the 20th century, climbing paths so narrow they disappear from any distance. Further west, Tlemcen, a city of Moorish heritage perched in the mountains. El Machoa Palace spreads its ornate courtyard beneath the Atlas. Intricate tilework, carved stucco, and the silence of a place that once governed an empire. Cable cars cross between hills, connecting a city that still carries the geometric elegance of Al-Andalus in its bones. And in the deep desert oasis, pools reflect the sky against walls of sand. Circular irrigation transformed the Sahara into green discs visible from space geometry imposed on chaos. A rose garden blooms in the middle of nowhere, its colours defined against the beige infinity beyond the last row of petals. Tassili N'Ajjer, deep in southeastern Algeria, where the Sahara stops being sand and becomes stone. A double World Heritage Site recognised for both its geology and its prehistoric art. Sandstone plateaus carved by wind over millions of years rise from the desert floor in formations so strange they look designed. Mushroom towers, natural arches, corridors of rock that twist and narrow into passages barely wide enough to walk through. "10,000 years ago, this was green. Rivers ran through these canyons, and the people who lived here painted their world onto the rock cattle. Dancers, hunters, rain. Over 15,000 cave paintings survive, the largest open-air gallery of prehistoric art on Earth. The paintings remain. The rivers do not. A lone figure walks toward an elephant-shaped rock arch, Tassili's most iconic formation. From the air, the human is a speck against geology measured in epochs. Nearby sandstone pillars stand like sentinels in the haze, their surfaces eroded into textures that shift with the light. Amber at noon, violet at dusk, black under stars. To reach Tassili requires an expedition. Convoys of 4x4 vehicles thread through narrow canyons, the sandstone walls towering on both sides. Tyre tracks in the sand are the only evidence of passage, and even those vanish by morning. The silence here is not empty. It is dense, textured, almost physical, the sound of a landscape that has been exhaling for 10 million years. At sunset, the stone changes colour every few minutes, amber to copper to violet, cycling through the spectrum of a dying fire. The wind picks up, and sand hisses against rock that has been listening to this sound for 10 million years. Tassili does not feel like Africa. It does not feel like Earth. It feels like the memory of a planet that once had water and forests and people who believed the rain would never stop. South of everything, south of the Oasis cities, south of the canyon roads, south of the last telephone tower. The Ahaga Mountains rise from the Saharan plateau like monuments to a forgotten age. Volcanic peaks, black and jagged, thrust through a landscape of red and ochre stone. Mount Ilamein, holy to the Tuareg, catches the last light at sunset and holds it long after the valleys below have gone dark. At Gour de Brezina, the landscape turns Martian. Red mesas and canyon walls, layered in geological time, stretch toward horizons that never arrive. The camping tents sit dwarfed beneath cliffs that have been eroding since before humans existed. At sunset, the sky turns teal against golden rock, and the silence becomes so complete it feels like pressure against the ears. And then, the dunes. The Sahara in its purest, most absolute form. Ripple patterns stretch to every horizon in parallel lines so precise they look combed. Wind moves sand in visible waves, reshaping the surface hour by hour. At sunrise, the shadows of dune crests cut the landscape into sharp planes of gold and violet. Geometry written by physics, erased by physics, rewritten again before noon. The scale is incomprehensible. Individual dunes rise 300 metres taller than most buildings in Algiers. The sand ocean covers an area larger than Western Europe, and in its centre, days pass without a single human footprint. The wind is the only narrator here, and it speaks in a language older than any civilization that ever tried to cross this space. But life moves through. Camel caravans cross the dunes, herds of dozens led by blue-robed Tuareg guides, whose families have navigated these routes for centuries without maps. Seen from altitude, the camels cast long shadows across the sand, a procession that looks ancient and impossible and entirely real. A Tuareg man adjusts his turban against the wind. Another leads his herd through a pass between dunes that will not exist tomorrow. These are not tourists performing a tradition. It's a people whose relationship with the desert is measured in generations, not Instagram posts. Modern Algeria meets ancient desert. An ATV races past a camel caravan, throwing sand into air that has been still for 1,000 years. On a dried salt lake, a red flag snaps in the wind, planted by someone, claimed by no one. Above it all, a paramotor casts its shadow on the dunes below a mechanical insect, crossing a landscape that predates insects themselves. A solitary tree stands silhouetted against a dusty sky, the only vertical thing for miles. Two birds cross the dune horizon at sunset, their wing beats the only movement in a frame that could be a painting. And on a pristine dune ridge, plastic bottles. Even here, at the edge of habitable Earth, the human footprint arrives before the human does. They call it the North Korea of the Sahara. But the Sahara is only one layer. Beneath it, Roman stone, Ottoman arches, cedar forests older than nations, gorges bridged by defiance, coastlines no tourist has touched, Oasis cities that have outlasted every empire that ever claimed them. Algeria does not explain itself. It does not need to. The land remembers what the headlines forgot. Thanks for watching. See you soon.